How you doing today, guys? I have to do this anyway, so I figure I might as well turn the camera on. What we're going to do is put together this mid-tech Jake Hoback Kwaiback. And I want to show you the parts. This is not my anodizing. It's a very light, like denim blue, stone-washed, anodized finish. Really nice and subtle looking. I'm showing you these parts. I figured this would be a good video to show people how some of these knives are able to tuck almost all the way in the handle, because some people don't know, is that internal stop pin. So the only thing I did to this knife was acid wash the blade and carbonize the lock face. Oh, and I also acid washed the rear hardware to match. This is the mid-tech, I believe, and it has the upgraded pivot, which is really nice looking, and the upgraded clip. I think. I don't think that's the standard that he uses, but anyways, where do we want to start? I've already done a few things, like get some of this grease on here. Normally I would use something a little thinner, but that's what Jake Hoback, or the owner, had in it, was this thicker, like lithium looking grease. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep it like it is. Show you the carbonized face on the lock there. And then pull your attention to that Hoback rolling detent. So if you guys don't know quite what that is a detent that is 100% adjustable. And you only want to do tiny, tiny little turns at a time. And it's not something you want to play with. It's not that the threads are delicate or anything, but it's almost like you set it and you have Loctite on there, and you set it and you just leave it. So you don't want like too tight of a detent one day or tight and then you decide you want to loosen it up the next day. No, just set it where you want it and leave it. So you can see it's actually inserted in there like a ballpoint pen. So that detent will roll around. I think it's a great idea. And it works really well. This does seem to be a press fit pivot, which helps make it nice and sturdy and kind of shows how nice his tolerances are. Alright, so let's get assembling this thing. I am going to show you just a little trick on the pivot when we get there. I'm going to put a little bit of Teflon tape around the pivot. It's not quite as strong as a Loctite, but that's kind of the point. It's not quite as strong as a Loctite. The owner can tweak it as he wants, but it does tighten up the space between the threads in that and just kind of helps it from unspinning. On flippers, it's a good idea. It's a good idea on most knives. Usually I would recommend going to the Teflon tape first before you go Loctite on your pivot. I do it with most of my Striders and stuff. So, alright, first of all, we're going to drop the pivot in there. And now he does not have a hardened washer in there, but who knows if that's really necessary. I don't. I'm just pointing it out. So that's bearing on the titanium. And then we're going to drop in the blade stop. And this blade also, I helped the owner before he sent it to me, had a slight centering issue. Now who knows if it was really an issue or maybe it just come out of adjustment. But I did want to point this out. If you guys watched that 450 video, the assembly video or review or whatever you want to call it, these are just flat standoffs. So we will have some power to adjust this centering by skewing these scales, because this is not a stepped standoff like the 450. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, go check out that 450 breakdown review. So it doesn't lock in here, you know, just what it is, just pointing it out. So what I'd like to do next is drop this hardware in here. Okay. And this knife construction is screwed to the backside scale. So these screws screw into that titanium. And I'm going to put my hands on here. We're going to drop some standoffs on there. It's a little bit of a tricky knife to assemble, but not too bad. So now we've got that loaded and ready to go. Set that down very carefully flat over here. And then we'll get this ready. This knife is assembled with only 2 Torx, T6 and a T10. And just to be sure, I've already done this to try to save some time. Did I show the acid wash blade on this yet? And how I have masked off. I haven't sharpened it yet, that'll be my last step, but I figure if I have to assemble it, I might as well turn the camera on. So you see how I've masked all that off. That's all the factory finish. You can see the well in there. Jake Hoback has milled a track in there, and I kept that track with the factory finish on there. And then also factory finish on the lock face. See my acid wash is right there where the lock is, and then acid wash up here. I also mask off all this interior here. Something a little bit weird, that detent kind of blew through on this side here. Now I don't think that's a big structural issue or anything, but it's like a little piece of napkin in there. Again, I tried to do a lot of this cleanup stuff off camera. There we go. There's your detent. And then you can see his track mills up here. And his mill stop there. And I masked all that off, so that's all factory. Just point being, for that Hoback rolling detent, it's going to be nice and smooth on there. I like this. When custom makers do this, it just helps with the closing of the knife. They round off this little portion where that detent rides and hits over. Some makers don't, some do. It's a nice attention to detail. And if you have a frame lock close to you, open and close it and you'll see why that transition is nice when it's round. Not square, you don't feel like 2 separate hits. Alright, so what I want to do is take my lighter fluid, take a little bit on my cotton swab here, and we're going to degrease this lock face just in case. I've already wiped this blade finish with some mineral oil, which is what I suggest for my acid wash finishes anyway, but I'm sure it'd work with any acid wash finish. I'm just going to make sure that lock face is clean. Same thing around the well here. Around that. Now I'm going to flip the Q-tip over and dry it off. Alright, we should be set there. We're going to drop this here. And again, these have already been lubed off camera here. Oh, first, let me put just a slight dab of lithium. Or not lithium, this is SFL0, got from a good friend. So I lubed up that Hoback rolling detent, not a lot. You see I just put a little dab on there. That's going to help make it a little more smooth. And now for those playing along at home or just checking it out, you'll see why that internal stop pin design is a really cool design. Because there's nothing up here for the blade stop. You know, most, let's see, what do I have on my self today in my pocket? See how most stops are up there? And then that's a stop for when it's closed, right? The internal stop pin, you can use up all this space because it's happening inside here. So it's a cool design. It's cool, and I don't see why it wouldn't be just as strong. Why would it matter if the stops up here or down here? So I don't know. I think a lot of makers are going to it to get this really nice slim down package. It gives you a lot of freedom on your design. I'm going to take this washer and go with that flat side down at the bearings. And then we're going to pick up this assembly over here. This could be tricky. Try and do it around the camera, because I know these are going to try to fall out on me. Again, sometimes you wish you had 5 hands. Alright, so we're just going to set that on there. Get this in here. I think we've got that registering right. Keep this pinched with my hand down here because I know that's set right. Got our things, standoffs there. Just kind of guide these in the holes a little bit. And then I'm going to take my T10 and just barely register these threads just to know I've hit the hole right. And this is what I had helped the owner with. I said loosen up all your screws on the knife, you know, excluding the clip. Clip doesn't matter, obviously. And then if you're having a centering issue, try this first. Just put your pivot in, tighten that up, because if everything has been machined right and everything's nice and surface ground here, ideally your blade should center up if your grinds are even. And it's a possibility that the grinds might be off. I'm not saying this knife is, but it's a possibility, especially when you go to factory knives. So I'm going to leave this here nice and loose, and I want to show you that trick about putting some Teflon tape on here. And I don't know if this knife had an issue or not. This is just nice insurance if you can do this. So I will insert my Teflon tape here, T10 here, and yes, I did accidentally cut myself earlier today. I was being stupid. I was trying to pry the lid off of this so I could clean it with the tip of this, my Spyderco, and I just sliced a little tiny little slice of my thumb. Not too bad. Anyways, put this on your screw here, put this here, and then only do like 2 or 3 turns. And see how I'm rolling with the threads? I hope this will focus. Roll with the threads, only wrap it around like twice. There's pretty tight tolerances on here, just break it off. Now that way, when you screw in clockwise, right, your thread won't try to, your Teflon tape won't try to come off itself. Does that make sense? So you got to put it on the same way you'd screw something on. Now, we've got our clip screws in there. So over here, we're still pretty loose here. Let's make sure everything's set. You can see how that's coming up flush, the pivot. I'm squeezing it together here. Put this in here. And this should be a pretty easy assembly because that back pivot should not spin. It is pressed in place. So we're just going to get it about right there. Just when you start to feel resistance, check it. Check your action. Your centering, it can still be misleading here because you don't have your back tightened down yet. So before I go canting these scales to try to center this blade up, what I mean by canting is making these scales go like this, because there is some fine adjustments that we can do there if the knife does not have the stepped spacers. Okay, if you don't know what I mean, again, go check that 450 out. So let's just tighten these down until we feel resistance with that T10. Until we feel resistant, again, just barely finger tight. Let's check. Yep, that can get tightened a little bit. See how we just went side to side? And I'm not going to close this all the way up because I could, if this blade is not centered in here, it could scratch my acid wash finish, or if you're rocking your factory finish, it could put a artificial scratch on there. So just a quick little tip there for you. A little bit tighter. Yeah. That's still a little too tight. Now there's no side to side, but I did tighten that up a little bit. Lock up still looks good. We'll see what centering looks like because we still need to come off that pivot just a little bit. Yeah, it's still off. So let's do the trick here. Take a sip of water here. Been talking for almost 15 minutes. Nalogen bottle with a cap. A beautiful thing. I've been using it for years. Here is what we're going to do, because we've tightened up the pivot first and then we tighten up the rear and we're still coming up with this. And why? Because this has a pretty strong tension set on this lock. I don't agree. Some people will tell you to take some of the spring out of this lock bar so it doesn't push the blade over, because this spring is trying to push this blade over, right? And that's exactly what's happening here. But if we can take these scales and kind of cant them a little bit, we'll be able to center this blade up. So which way would we need to push it? If this bar is going through the center here of the pivot, the blade's hooked on this, and it's coming this way, that means we need to push this scale up and pull this one back, which will move that bar and walk that blade over this way, right? So how we're going to do that is we're going to literally loosen all these screws up, and then I'm going to put pressure up and then pressure down on this side, and just that little bit is not going to take much. Should center that up. Again, this is my first time assembling this knife back. It might not work, but usually it will. So let's loosen up the rear first, because you want to undo how you did it. So we tighten up that first and then that, so when we loosen them up, back and then front. Again, it's just how I do things. I don't have an engineering degree. I was very close to a graphic design degree. I really should go back and do that, but whatever. Alright, so we didn't need it quite that loose. Loosen it a little bit too much. But you do want to take all the tension off there. All the tension off the rear screws. And now we need to walk the tip of the knife over towards this side. So again, I'm going to do it with the knife not closed, because I don't want to scratch the side of the blade. Kick this up. I'm putting a lot of pressure here and then down. See, I'm not even touching that other scale. So I'm actually skewing these scales just a little bit. And I'm going to tighten up the pivot first as I'm putting a lot of... See, it's almost hurting because this is stabbing me in the rear. I'm going to tighten this up. Not super tight, but enough to lock it down. We're not going to check it. We're just going to tighten this up. Tighten this up. Go back and tighten this up, because we got to lock these scales down with a little bit of pressure on them. Otherwise, they'll move right back. And now, let's see what that did for us. It's better, I think. Let's try it one more time. I'm going to put a little more pressure this time. And this is what it takes sometimes. This is just your fine tuning. If you want to, you can even pull the blade over with your finger to try to help it walk itself over. See, I'm holding it like this, putting pressure up here, putting down here. Yep, it's a lot to do. You can tell I've done it a lot. Trying to get my grip right, so I'm pushing over. Kind of hard to try to keep everything in frame while still trying to tune this knife up. It's getting close. And again, the grind just could be just a smidge off. So I'm going to try to look at this spacing here. And let me check the tension. And pivot's just a touch too tight. There's one more brute force adjustment. Not for the faint of heart, but it's real life. And when I worked with custom cars and in the car business, some things just need to be manhandled a little bit. I'm going to show you what I mean. Got the action going good. Now to fine tune, okay, because it looks like that's about all we're gonna get. But if my eye's not deceiving me, does this grind? Let me do it with a toothpick because I don't want to scratch this knife. Does this grind not look like it's just a touch off? See how it looks like it's coming down to here, and then that is almost ending right there. We'll see. Looks like it. Maybe. They don't look like they end exactly. See what I'm saying? This looks like it's like this. This looks like it's like this. Which is fine. I don't know if these are hand ground. We're really OCD geeking out here. But that's going to matter. If you're trying to center up a blade with the grind that's just a touch off, it's going to be just a touch off. So I'm not even sure if I should do this next step. But if I was, I want to show you guys what it would do. Do it while the knife is screwed together tight and you have good action. This knife is solid as a rock right now. The flipping action's great. Really, you could leave this alone right now. You really could. What a cool looking knife. Let's get the, no, let's not put the clip on. I'm going to show you this first. So if we really wanted to just visually, because the knife looks, it's still off a little bit. And again, that could just be the adjustment on the Hoback rolling detent. If that's pushed in a little more, then it might be pushing this blade over just a little bit. But I don't want to touch this. The owner sent this to me. Did not request for me to touch that, so I'm not going to touch it, assuming he has it exactly where he wants it, and it's probably Loctite. Once you break Loctite, you know, then you got to re-put it on, wait the 24 hours. I'm not going to do that for him. I am going to try to just brute strength this, and how I'm going to do that is just bend it a little bit. See how that blade tip walks over? And if you can walk your way down towards the pivot as the knife's closed, see? And again, that grind just does look like it's just a touch off. So that's about as best as I can do. And what I was trying to say, in the car business, sometimes when a door's not closing right, even on a Mercedes, you got to make those fine adjustments and just tweak it down. They're all separate pieces here. Sometimes even the best machinists in the world, you know, and metal can shrink and change and all this and that, and stuff can happen. So that's a fine adjustment that you can do. I've been using little stuff like that for a long time, so someone may not agree with it, but it works. Isn't that cool though? What a great looking knife. The Hoback rolling detent on there. You can see that internal stop pin allowed this knife to close down completely into itself, where you could not have done that with this stop pin being in that position. There's just, that space is being occupied by that pin. Let's get the clip on here and get out of here. Again, my little tip to you, put your screws in your clip first. It's usually easier. Then kind of set it down and register it. Here's my T6. Come on now. A little bit, just finger tension. Position the clip where you want it. I think it should be dead center of that middle bar, I mean that middle bar. There's a fuller here. Fuller here. Let's put it right dead center in this, just for comfort and visual. What would I say? Visual whatever. Now we're going to tighten it down. Tighten it down. And we're set. So when I acid washed his hardware here, I did make sure I acid washed the places, well, the exposed screw there. The front side of that screw, or the back side, however you want to say it. And then I did mask off the barrel of the screw. What a cool knife. Now to go sharpen it and ship her out. So there you go. Have a good day, guys. See ya.